The devil is real, whether you believe he is or not. He has a master plan. Now, in no way, shape, or form can I ever claim to have a full view of the master plan, but I believe I can see a portion of it, and many people have. I think it started from the beginning, as far back as you can go. But I don't have the resources to go back that far, so I'm starting around the time of Spiritism, spirit wrappings, table turning, table tappings and wrappings, Spiritism, Spiritualism, Spiritists, and mediums contacting the dead, supposedly the dead. They were definitely spirits, but it was demonic spirits. Now, it's a pretty scary subject, so don't continue watching this video if you are easily scared of a master plan of the actual devil who actually exists, his fallen angels, the demons that perpetuate these waves, these flaps. It's very much like a UFO flap. And I'll talk about UFOs and demons very shortly. But right now, I'm going to be talking about Spiritism, spirit wrappings, spirit tappings, spiritualism, and spiritists and mediums of the 1800s and the early 1900s. It seemed to start sometime around 1850, 1860, and it continued. It continued and continued. It was a legitimate phenomenon of actual demonic spirits contacting people. That's when the psychologists and the scientists started to get involved, because when doctors and lawyers and respectable people went to these seances and experienced actual supernatural contact with an actual spirit entity, and they knew for a fact it was not a trick, it was not an illusion, it was not stage magic, it wasn't the new form of street magic, it was real. Harry Houdini completely denied it was real, but that's because by the time Harry Houdini came around, there were already dozens of books written on the subject debunking Spiritism, Spiritualism, these spirit wrappings and tappings, and these seances were debunked. And there were dozens of books, at least a dozen books, in Harry Houdini's time on how to copy these tricks, how to perform these illusions, and every which way how they could be recreated. On top of that, there were books upon books from psychologists and psychiatrists and scientists showing that it's just simply the imagination of the human filling in the gaps of some trickery, some sleight of hand, some illusion, some prestidigitation, just a different format for a stage magician being at a table with people around it, holding hands, in a dark room, in a frightful setting, and most definitely, there are charlatans, there are fake mediums, there are fake spiritists, there are fake wrappings and fake tappings, not from any spirit entities, but from contraptions, and from tricks, and illusions, and gimmicks. But those were all created after the legitimate phenomenon started, where nobody was faking it, where it was real. The fact that there are spiritists today, let's check this out right here. I'm going to show you where Spiritism is today. And then I'm going to go back to around the 1940s. Perhaps the 1800s was too far away. Perhaps the 1940s was even too far away. Well, here is an instance I just came across, which I believe could be legitimate. There is a spirit lodge called the Bristol Spirit Lodge in the UK, and they regularly have seances on a regular basis, and they do record them. but only the audio, because it's in pitch black most of the time. This is a good example of the type of stuff that happens during seances, using objects such as a spirit trumpet. What one of these trumpets is, it's a very light, usually aluminum type device, specifically for the spirits to speak into. A more sophisticated version of this device is used at the Bristol Spirit Lodge. Here is one example, the voice of the famous author behind Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, who died on July 7th, 1930, and he was really big into Spiritism. He was really big into seances and communicating with the dead. He firmly believed in it. The reason he firmly believed in it is because he had been to many seances and he had seen firsthand legitimate contact with spirits, whereas someone like Harry Houdini didn't have that firsthand contact. I believe Harry Houdini probably came across a lot of magic books which showed how you can recreate the tricks at a seance, but the fact of the matter is these tricks originally were actual spirits, and the scary thing about it is they are demonic spirits pretending to be human spirits. This clip from the Bristol Spirit Lodge is a really good piece of evidence showing that it's a demonic entity imitating the voice of Arthur Conan Doyle. It's beta testing Arthur Conan Doyle's voice. It knows they probably want to hear someone famous, someone connected to Spiritism famously, so it conjures up the voice of Arthur Conan Doyle. But this entity probably hadn't used the Arthur Conan Doyle speech pattern and his accent in a while, his obscure Scottish accent. And so it had to bring it up to the best of its ability, and he was testing it out like a prototype. It was beta testing Arthur Conan Doyle's voice. Now this voice apparently has been summoned up in many seances, time and time again, as a favorite among these demonic entities. But just because they brought it up probably ever since Arthur Conan Doyle died in 1930, it doesn't mean they're not a little rusty. So what you're about to hear is a demonic entity imitating the voice of Arthur Conan Doyle. You can hear the people at the seance make comments in the background. And I believe the main voice is Emily, because she's used to communicating with these spirits.
Good evening, this is Arthur Conan Doyle.
That is really, really clear. Thank you.
Good evening, this is Arthur Conan Doyle.
Perfect.
Research in all aspects of spiritualism, 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 spiritualism.
Wow.
Good evening, this is Arthur Conan Doyle. Can we discuss all aspects of spiritualism, 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 spiritualism? Spiritualism is in the heart of many. Spiritualism in the heart of many. Good evening, this is Arthur Conan Doyle. Spiritualism is in the heart of many. I would like to share my views.
Absolutely.
I would like to share my views.
Wow.
I would like to share my views.
Absolutely. And that is really clear, sir. Really, really clear.
Thank you.
This recording came from the Bristol Spirit Lodge, who record every single session. Now, you're automatically going to jump to the conclusion, if you tend to not believe in seances or spirits or contact from spirit entities, you're going to say it's fake. I think it's legitimate. The voices go beyond that. Usually, the demonic voice sounds like Gollum, like a demonic spirit. Let's give an example of the typical voice that this demon uses.
My shall,
Well done, Winston.
my shall converse.
Definitely.
It sounds very Gollum-like, very scary. I'm not going to play too much more of this, It's the legitimate sound of an actual demonic entity, but it's trying to purposefully sound scary. They can speak in a totally normal voice. As a matter of fact, these entities have been around for so long, they know every single language. And they specialize, these types anyway, specialize in mimicking different human voices. So they can mimic every accent, every language, every human, very closely. Now, they obviously have to rehearse, and that's what I believe we just heard, a rehearsal of Arthur Conan Doyle's voice. But this is usually the Gollum-like, demonic-like voice that it gives.
Yes, I share.
Oh, wow.
I share.
Ooh.
It sounds like an old lady / Gollum. Pretty scary stuff.
Oh.
I share.
Well, we
And it keeps repeating some nonsensical stuff. And the medium is impressed, and the people that witness this firsthand are impressed. And to prove that it's not some type of gimmick to sell tickets to make money, they do not charge a single penny for any of these sessions. And if you want to go there and book a date there, good luck, because it would appear that they are booked for an entire year in advance. I believe it has something to do with the fact that it is real. People want to experience it, and they all say full, closed, circle, meaning the closed members that normally participate in these events. These are not normal seances. They're guaranteed contact with a spirit. I do not recommend indulging in this type of activity unless you want an entity like this to follow you home. But it would seem that this Bristol Lodge is haunted. There are 2 mediums, but it would appear to me that it's a haunted location. They pretty much do not show photographs. This is pretty much the best photograph you'll see. It looks to be someone's house. And perhaps these are images taken there, where tables are floating and whatnot. But it would appear to me that the people in charge of the Bristol Lodge go out of their way to not prove that it's real. They go out of their way to not provide too much proof. Not because it's fake, but because the demonic spirit will cease to communicate if any scientists show up. It's the reason Harry Houdini was never able to find proof. It's the reason this Bristol Spirit Lodge will never allow scientists to turn it into a laboratory. But even if scientists did turn it into a laboratory, the evidence would be mocked and ridiculed in the scientific community. I've personally had one too many encounters with a demonic entity, and I can tell you these voices freak me out. That's the demon actually singing along to a song, and it seems playful, but it keeps that Gollum, old lady, freaky demonic voice most of the time. And the reason the ladies are laughing is because they're having a full conversation. It's a fun experience for them. The reason it's fun for them is because they don't know that it's a demonic entity. The second that knowledge actually was infused into their mind, they would be freaking the freak out, and they wouldn't be laughing anymore unless the laughs are a result of being nervous. I can tell you this seems legitimate to me. If it's not, if it's later proven this is false, they definitely have a really good ventriloquist that can do Arthur Conan Doyle's voice. And this is where I got Arthur Conan Doyle's voice.
Good evening, this is Arthur Conan Doyle.
And you can download it for yourself, investigate it yourself. I personally think this is legitimate. But this is only scratching the surface. Proving the devil and demons exist is not an easy task. Demons are experts at convincing anyone they're not real, except for a small few groups here and there, like the Bristol Spirit Lodge, like me when I was harassed. People like Roger Morneau. Now, Roger Morneau is a guy who spoke French fluently, and it was the only language he spoke. He was born in Quebec, Canada. Roger Morneau is going to be the character I'm going to be focusing on. He was born April 18th, 1925. He passed away on September 22nd, 1998, at the age of 73, and he was a Christian of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, I am not Seventh-day Adventist, so that's where I'm going to differ with him a little bit. But let me tell you, even though he joined the first Christian church he came across, literally, while leaving a demonic worshiping organization, and he stuck to that church to his death, I can't blame the guy. No matter which Christian organization approached him first, as long as they approached him with kindness and with an open heart and with Bible studies all night long, which he insisted on, I think he would have joined any denomination. I'm not talking about denominations here. I'm talking about a guy who was freaked out legitimately because he had first-hand contact with demonic entities, or so he claims. Now, obviously, he can't defend himself because he's passed on. So let's just assume that he did have contact with demons. There are many flags that pop up when I watched his story on YouTube. You can watch his story on YouTube yourself. Just type in Roger Morneau, ROGRMORNEAU, and you will see many videos where he was interviewed. Now, there's a new documentary coming out called Charmed by Darkness, and this man was one of Roger Morneau's best friends who brought him into the Church of Seventh-day Adventists. But I'm not going to focus on that. I'm not pushing that. I'm not a member of that church. I don't particularly believe in the little things they believe in. And I don't even come from that perspective necessarily. My grandfather was Buddhist. I believe in a lot of Buddhist principles. But there is power in Jesus' name if you believe in him. Now, I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm going to talk about is Roger Morneau. I recommend you watch this full testimony, the 3-hour and 19-minute version. It goes into detail.
Told me, hey.
And he tells as much as he can. Roger Morneau was freaked out. The guy learned English, and he wrote about it a good 30, 40 years after it happened. Why did he sit on that information so long? I personally believe because he was scared for his life. He said 6 months after he left the devil-worshipping organization in Montreal, Canada, he was harassed by a poltergeist or knocking on the doors and the walls. He would hear just all night long demonic knocking. And I experienced something very similar. I experienced 6 months of demonic activity, which included knocking, rapping and tapping, and poltergeist activity of items being thrown off my shelves. That's where I relate to Roger Morneau. I can't say for sure if his story is 100% true, or if it's 75% true, or 50% true, and he likely even changed the locations. So perhaps it didn't take place in Montreal. I received a response after asking where was the building? Where was this devil worship building? I asked the people who run the Roger Morneau YouTube channel, I asked them if they could tell me where the building was. And they said Roger purposely left out the location to protect himself and others. Now that seems like a cop-out, but I'm on the trail. I am going to investigate this. If anyone in Montreal or Quebec, Canada, or anywhere around there have heard any rumors, any urban legends, any myths locally about a demon spirit worshipping organization, or maybe they're just going to be called Spiritists, perhaps just a Spiritist worshipping organization, but one with elaborate gold gilding, elaborate staircases, with paintings of angels on the wall. The most fascinating thing Roger mentioned from my perspective is the fact that he saw firsthand 100 paintings approximately of angels of light painted professionally and hung on the walls of this secret demon spirit worshipping organization. It seems like a cliche, it seems like a joke, but he was dead serious, and he has mentioned it and wrote about it, and then he died with that testimony never being redacted. He never stepped back on anything he said. Perhaps he changed the location. Perhaps it's in Quebec, Canada, and I believe it has moved. This was in 1946, many years ago. So if the devil had an elite group of people, Roger says he only spoke French back then, which leads me to believe the entire organization being located in Montreal or Quebec, where he was born. Likely the entire organization only spoke French, which leads me to believe that the devil prefers French for this tiny little sect of his tiny little church of humans where he lets them in on the secret. Of course, in this video, it will give little pinpoints of information. Like, for example, Roger was brand new to the organization, but they trusted him enough to reveal some of the Master's plan. The Master, or the Great Master, is Lucifer, or Satan, according to Roger Morneau. That's what they called him, the Master or the Great Master. And they supposedly told him the devil's plans for the year 1700. They weren't telling him the plans for the 1800s or the 1900s. They thought he was safe enough to tell him plans that were a couple hundred years old. This is the master plan of the devil, to deceive people about the existence of Satan and his angels. But they revealed to Roger bluntly. They showed him the room where they worship Satan personally, Lucifer, the fallen angel. Roger says he saw a painting above Lucifer's altar, and that painting was a full-body, very long, very tall painting of Lucifer, of the devil, who Roger says is very real. It all seems like scare tactics until you watch this entire 3-hour interview. Roger doesn't break character. He's not making it up. He 100% believes it. This guy is not easy on questions. This guy asks him legitimate questions, but this guy's also a member of Roger's church, so he's not going to be too harsh on him. But they were curious because it's interesting. One of the facts Roger claims is that Franz Mesmer was chosen by Satan himself to bring hypnotism to the forefront of the world, to bring hypnotism, to hypnotize people. It's a method you see in some organizations, that they still use Franz Mesmer techniques, also known as mesmerism, to pretty much brainwash people while they're still awake to do what you want them to do. That seems outlandish until you listen to the entire story from A to Z. I don't have enough time to cover it right now, but in part 2 of this video, I will go through and show the video and show the highlights that freaked me out the most. The ones that I agree with, and I'll even show you the ones that I do not agree with. But I still think Roger was telling the truth. So how could he throw in some information that may not be true or may not ring true, but it could still be true? The spirits followed Roger around 24/7, even before he was recruited into it. His best friend recruited him into it via a seance, where he asked Roger, "Do you want to talk to your dead mom?" Roger was skeptical, but he was maybe a little bit freaked out. He's like, "Well, I never thought about that. I don't know. It seems a little odd." He said something to that effect, and Roger's friend said, "What are you, chicken?" And that's all his friend needed to say to get Roger to say, "I'm not chicken. I'll go to that. I'll do it." So Roger goes to the seance, and like his friend said, his mother showed up, but Roger was specific. He said, "I don't want to see her. I only want to hear her." Strings were being pulled behind the scenes, and Roger did hear the voice of what sounded like his dead mother, but it was not his dead mother. It was a demonic entity mimicking the voice of his dead mother. This is revealed by Roger's friend later. It was at this point that Roger's friend asked him to join the demon spirit worshipping organization, and tells him he has been chosen specifically by the spirits to join this elite group in Montreal, and it could be in Quebec. The location is a secret, and I believe it has moved ever since then. I came across this video a good 4 years ago, and I was like, I don't know. I probably watched 30 minutes of it. It freaked me out a little bit. And maybe 3 years ago I watched 30 more minutes, but last week I sat and watched the entire 3 hours, and then I watched the parts that really ring true to me, especially the poltergeist activity after he left. I didn't join or leave any type of devil worship organization like Roger did, but I experienced very similar poltergeist activity for 6 months. Roger experienced it for 6 months as well, but as a matter of fact, Roger says, as he was writing his later books, Beware of Angels, The Power of Prayer, A Trip to the Supernatural, that he was harassed, and poltergeist activity did happen while he was trying to write his book. So that's very freaky, very interesting. I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to investigate to the best of my ability. I'm going to try to track down that building in Montreal or Quebec, and I have a theory that perhaps it started in France. You know that French guy in The Matrix Reloaded? He reminds me of the devil character that Roger Morneau talks about. Lucifer apparently favors French. This character in The Matrix is a program. It knows every language on The Matrix in the world, but it chooses and it prefers French because it likes to curse in French. It says cursing in French just sounds good. It likes the way curse words sound in French. Perhaps this character right here, in some small way, either coincidentally or on purpose, represents Lucifer himself. Where is the best place to hide any small elite organization of the devil's followers? Montreal, Canada? Quebec, Canada? That seems to me like the perfect place to hide such an organization. Now, this isn't a witch hunt. If I were, by some miracle, able to track down and prove that the building Roger was recruited into still stands and still has the fallen angel paintings and still has what Roger describes as literal worshippers of demonic spirits, I wouldn't legally be able to do anything. But I think such an organization, if it existed, is worth looking for and finding. The devil is a slippery guy. There's a good chance it would be impossible to find, let alone prove, such an organization even existed, meaning Roger Morneau was likely recruited into the actual Illuminati, the actual first-hand witnesses of Lucifer himself. And perhaps the devil is using these French Canadians as a prototype, a beta test, to see how men even react to being brought into his plan. Feel free to watch the entire video of Roger Morneau's interviews. There are multiple ones on YouTube. I'm going to leave you with just the beginning part of Roger's testimony of when he was first brought into the secret elite organization of demon spirit worshippers.
But it was true that Wednesday night came, he was there with his big Lincoln, step in, and we went to one of the most beautiful area of Montreal. And the place was a mansion. Now, a mansion is usually very large. We call this a small mansion. It was beautiful, most beautiful place. Yeah.
Roger, your friend George took you and Roland to this mansion where people worshipped the demons.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like there? What kind of people were there?
Well, it was a big surprise for me, as I kind of made up in my mind an idea that they were going to be rough-looking characters. But as we entered the place, I was amazed to see that they were all very well dressed, well-mannered, and that a lot of the people, as we were being introduced to people, were professionals, doctors, attorneys, a lot of business people. And see what they had a praise session to the gods, which is the spirit counselors. which are in charge of legions of spirits, of demon spirits.
So what were your impressions the first time you went down into that worship room?
Well, it was, we'd been there maybe a half a dozen times, and the high priest told us after the meeting was over he wanted to talk to us, my friend and I. So after the most people had left, he says, the master of my life has revealed to me that it is time for you people to become acquainted with the worship room of the gods. Well, we started to move toward a beautiful grand staircase. Beautiful. The banister was huge. It was massive, and the wrought iron work that they had done in it was super. The beautiful decorations on the walls, the chandelier on the first landing. See, that was the first landing. About you go down about 8 or 10 steps, and then you had the first landing. It was huge and beautiful. The light arrangement was the nicest I had ever seen in my life. When we got into this sanctuary area, it wasn't very brightly lit, but everything was well magnified. The beauty of certain things, you know, like a lot of the things were gold plated or gold trims. See, the little altars where they had the spirits that had materialized. They photographed them, and then they had paintings made of them. And there was probably about maybe 100 of those around the place.
Sort of like a shrine?
Yeah, and underneath there was a little altar where you have incense and things that they would use in their prayer sessions and things like that, devotions to certain spirits. And some of the objects in there, the priest said, were solid gold. It was a unique experience to see that.
So how did you feel when you walked into that room?
I felt that these people had power, and they had a lot of it.
Did that attract you?
Yes and no.
You had mixed feelings about it?
I had mixed feelings about it, yeah.
This is part 1. Stay tuned for part 2. I thank you for watching. This has been John Rasmus with Occult Unmasked. Be seeing you.